Hello and welcome to round 2 with Thopter Gifts. Play first, great. Oh my gosh, I love that Thirst for Knowledge is in this hand. It can just be anything. So, opponent mulligans. Our land sequencing is pretty clear here. We're just going to play our island, play the fortress. This turn's interesting. I could EE for 2, or I could play Thopter Foundry. EE for 2 is better if my opponent happens to be on Obzon and is playing a Grimflayer next turn, whereas holding EE and then Thoptering is better if my opponent's on like a tokens deck, or if they're even Obzon and they end up playing Lingering Souls here. So I just extend the Foundry and wait and see, and I immediately get punished because my opponent plays Grimflayer. It happens. And I can make the decision to EE for 2 next turn if I want. But I'm just going to use my mana this turn to Thirst. So they take the gifts. Interesting. And then I have an option here. Definitely discarding an artifact. I can bin extra lands to the other thirsts later once I've established my land base going later. I can discard the EE to protect my combo against Cryptic or Kolaghan's Command. Whereas the other way around plays to the battlefield, but I have to pop my own Foundry to do it. And I determined that EEing my own Thopter just is stupid and sucks. So we're okay. I mean, my opponent's not super threatening me with the Flare. I can just fire off the Thirst and get somewhere. Fire the Thirst in response to the Inquisition. Here, I'm going to be... So, there's an interesting debate here about what I end up with. If I discard the Foundry, I end up with Burial Gifts and lands. So I think the right play is to discard Burial Rights and leftover lands. I should have discarded the Watery Grave here. Yeah, I guess... So if I get back Explosives, I can Watery Grave to EE for 3 to kill Liliana was the logic. But, I don't know. So I get hit. Stuff happens. I'm going to Visions. Visions to top land to bottom. I just want to chain off lands. Or, I want to chain off non-lands here. I'm just looking for action. And I'm not huge on just jamming gifts here. Rather just timely try to clear up the Flare. My opponent clearly doesn't have the ability to answer that. I can wait. My life total is pretty high. Taking chip shots from Tarmogoyf isn't a big deal. What is a big deal is having enough blockers to handle Grimflayer in the short term. And that was a Maelstrom Pulse aimed not at the tokens, but at the Thopter Foundry, which is interesting. So I can no longer muddle for the combo, but fortunately I have other routes to victory. Here I'm gifting with Muddle Up to protect against the discard spell. Again, fine with just taking this. And this messes up some of the gift piles I wanted to make. Except for, I figured out this one. This is a cool one. I'm just going to get a bunch of interaction, but... Sorry, we're going to get a bunch of interaction and another gift. So, the cool piece of interaction here is that I get to get Spell Snare, which protects from the on-the-stack ooze. And my graveyard's actually kind of important right now, especially with the Unburial Rights. Cutting off access to that is a little obnoxious, though I guess I'm getting to the point where I can just cast Elish anyways if I find it. Oh, the other reason I don't cast Serum Visions last turn is that I'm going to cast Gifts and Shuffle. You always want to cast this after your Shuffle effects because that's when the Scries actually matter. So my opponent gives me the Spot Removal spell on another Gifts. And this was a pretty good rip. I think it's possible I should have fired Path on end step on something, but I'm not entirely sure. It's close. Fire Visions. This is super huge because now I'm just churning out a bunch of stuff. And this is actually just going to immediately find engineered explosives to clear away my opponent's attackers. From there, it should be pretty easy. Especially, again, I still have Muddle up to protect against random discard spells on my gifts. Here I should have chump blocked one of those away because I'm going to be clearing the battlefield. My opponent souls, re-souls. I rebuy my EE. Killing the ground creatures, I think, is more relevant than killing the spirits. Just popping now and aggroing because they're not blocking. Yeah, take the damage, whatever. And now that my opponent has a different threat, I change up my line a bit because the additional EE is not a guaranteed way to clear the battlefield. So I get back Foundry, and then I can set up combo next turn, which also blanks the Lingering Souls tokens. I think this sequencing was actually kind of bad on my part. I think I could have played it a little more conservatively or a little more aggressively, and I think I kind of half and halved it. Leave up Muddle to counter Thoughtseize or something like that, which happens. This saves me mana next turn because the sword's in my hand just to cast, and I don't have to spend runes mana to get it back. Yeah. I definitely made some questionable plays. I should have conserved my life total more. Yeah, and from here I'm just kind of churning through stuff. My opponent doesn't have a Scavenging Ooze represented, so I don't... Nothing's really threatened. I'm just kind of, wait until combat so I don't randomly get blown up by Maelstrom Pulse. I get to make a bunch of actions. Wow, I'll, make some better decisions next turn with all my extra mana. We've reached nonsense time. I can take a hit, churn out extra mana for later turns, make a bunch of Thopters now, or at least one Thopter now. Yeah, nothing really interesting is going on right now besides me just repeating the same action over and over and going to 1,000,000 life and then eventually killing my opponent. Their only real out is find Scavenging Ooze, then have me not respond by getting back EE. They have to have Decay Ooze. It's just a huge mess of stuff. Stuff that doesn't matter. The real issue is that I spewed off a bunch of clock time. I think that leading on EE for 0 set me up better because my tokens handle the creatures on the battlefield. Should have chump blocked. I think there was stuff on the early EE turns that I put myself into some lower onboard value situations that cost me clock time, which later is going to come up to matter. Yeah, here you just get to alpha and then make a million things. Yeah, okay, this is very clearly over. Great card. Oh wow, my opponent didn't have their Moto Crash when they activated Mishra's Bauble? That's so lucky. Yeah, I could just take the hit. Who cares? Right-click, attack all. Yeah, complete and utter garbage time there. It combines the worst parts of combo and control win conditions. This was why I was initially very opposed to Thopter Sword kill existing. Okay, sideboarding. Relic is good, shuts off Tarmogoyf, Lingering Souls, Grimflayer. Elspeth's just the best ever, my opponent can't repeat the card, etc., etc. And Purge takes out Liliana and Grimflayer. Great stuff. Don't like Oblivion Ring. Even though it answers Lily, my opponent's going to decay or pulse it. I do like Detention Sphere, though, because that kills Lingering Souls. I don't like Elish on Burial. I don't think Elish Norn does significant amounts. It's possible I just want Elish Norn as a big doofus, but not committed to that. Cut Gifts because you're cutting combo, even though I can Gifts for value up the line. I kind of like not being as clunky. It's possible I could have trimmed on combo a little, and Timely's just Garbo here. One of the keys is that I don't want to lose the Surgical Extraction because my win conditions are pretty clustered. Maybe I wanted Wrath of God just to take care of multiple threats or bigger threats, but not entirely sure. Possible a Muddle to make sure should have gone too, because inherently the counter instant or sorcery is not great in the matchup. Spell Center is very good. Yeah, certainly debatable. Okay, welcome to game 2 of Thopter versus Obzon. Snapkeep lands interaction combo Elspeth. This is just not even close. Sadly, Elspeth, my opponent takes the piece of interaction, which implies that they're going to try to aggressively come after me. Fortunately, we drew another piece of interaction. Or it implies that there's another Thoughtseize for Elspeth, which makes me very sad. Again, as always, if you're exposing a piece first, you want to expose the sword. Neil Spellbomb will have to do some work to get around, especially without our Detention Sphere to take care of random permanent. I'm fine with putting both combo pieces on the battlefield because I can just activate them and make dorks. So I get the Transmute Muddle to find another artifact. I choose Talisman because I actually want the mana to get up to Elspeth as opposed to a redundant Thopter Foundry or something. And the reason for this is I'm trying to prevent my opponent from having enough stuff to Nihil Spellbomb through all my things. Them spewing off a Spellbomb is great for me because I can power through it. This is kind of going to get interesting because I'm going to have to pressure Liliana. I want the cheaper interactive spell for sure here. And here I can lightly combo through everything. I think... So I left up 2 here because if my opponent goes Decay... Yeah, that was a mistake. I should have made another Dork. If they decay, they're going to decay the Foundry, and I'm going to have to reassemble combo anyways. So I should have made another creature that turn. And it's going to get a little obnoxious moving forward. Yeah, I think I played incorrectly conservatively around what's going on here. I didn't feel the need to pressure Liliana this turn because 2 is nowhere near ultimate. Discard the Thirst because we are low on cards, but we have all the interaction and combo needed. We can start, killing the Nihil Spellbomb. Unfortunately, our combo gets disrupted, and my opponent targeted the wrong thing. They targeted the sword instead of the Thopter, which is a pretty crucial error. I can sack the Talisman and now reassemble my going off nonsense. Got a Liliana down, play a Talisman, and I look to be in a pretty good spot. Except that happens, which is not very fun. I get to gain some life, but now I have to rebuild everything I own. Fulminator is going to be an issue because I'm short on mana, and most of my outs involve having excessive amounts of mana to do stuff and ancient or Academy runes and everything. This kind of fell apart pretty fast. I'm trying to think where I went wrong earlier. I think I maybe could have had one more card, but the Creeping Corrosion is just super brutal. And holding the EE wouldn't have helped. I've got a lot of time, so I don't need to spew a removal spell on the Fulminator Mage. I do want to line up an instant speed removal spell with the Shambling Vent because I have a hard removal spell for a big creature. Now we're both just top deck moding, which is pretty bad as I start winding down on clock with a win con that takes a lot of time. Not interested in wrathing half of a souls. I just want a foundry here. And the other part of the foundry going off here is that I want to protect it from discard rather than, abrupt decay or whatever is going to answer it anyways. I'd rather just protect it from my opponent having a Thoughtseize later. Opponent starts going after my mana now. And now I'm in a spot where I need to find an artifact pretty quickly to start protecting against these souls. Quite possibly the worst thing my opponent could have top decked for me, because I can no longer win with my normal combo, and my only way to kill them is the one Elspeth remaining in my deck. So I have to draw a bunch of lands and the Elspeth. Yeah, it's possible at that point I should have packed it in early. So again, Path fires off at the creature that I can only kill with instant removal. I don't want to spew the Ghost Quarter because I need 5 lands. Lily takes up very slowly. I guess playing the Relic, it doesn't really matter against the Stony Silence because I don't have a way to handle it now that my Tangent Sphere is in my graveyard from like turn 1. And here's the top decking Elspeth, which, spoiler alert, doesn't really happen. Fire Thirst for basically this exact scenario on main phase. Keeping the Relic wouldn't have helped because it would have been discarded to Liliana, so it's not like I would have actually had an artifact. Yeah. This is all horrible. We end up dying to this Scavenging Ooze and this other Scavenging Ooze really quickly because I can't find the Elspeth. And because Gifts can't necessarily find what I need it to, though I guess against Stony Silence and Ooze, I don't think there's a way for me to assemble my deck that isn't like Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, that Gifts could have found what I wanted it to. Yeah. I wasted a bunch of time there, and it's going to cost me. Okay, so back to sideboarding. I made a quick swap. And I shaved on combo because it's clear my opponent's just going super hard against it with Stony Creeping Corrosion. Instead, I have Elish Norn as an alternate win condition, and an Oblivion Ring to handle Stony Silence. Not that big, but little changes like that can make a big difference. Okay, welcome to Turbo Mode Game 3 of Thopter Gifts versus Obzon. Snap, keep, combo. This might actually kill my opponent fast enough to matter. Keep both. I want lands and spells to get somewhere. My opponent breaks up the combo. I draw the card that I know I kept. And my notes start getting a little sparse here as I'm trying to play to the clock, which is unfortunate, but something that happens. I want Tolaria West for Academy Runes. I want Path to interact, and I stack them so that I draw the Path next turn if I need to interact with, like a Grimflayer or something. Yeah, I'm just not going to combo this game. Fire Sword and just play for a game where I hit Elspeth. Pretty straightforward. Path, now that my opponent's tapped out of that. Force them to use Neo Spellbomb to handle this graveyard, which I don't really care about anything in the graveyard right now, so that's fine. I can also Tolaria West for an EE if needed. Yeah, I should not have just gotten Academy Runes. That was pretty loose. I should have been finding EE later. Didn't feel the need to kill Baloth ASAP in case I drew a Wrath effect here. But now I want to kill Baloth on this attack. Maybe I should have lined up Oblivion Ring with Baloth. It's hard to say. I like saving Oblivion Ring for very specific cards here. Line up the spell center on the threat that it can actually answer. Just spew it immediately, basically. The reason I didn't take the Baloth hit there is because the 4 damage chunks makes this clock significantly worse. This clock also. Sadly, if I'd lined up the ring with the Baloth, I'd have a path for the land. So I'd be under less of a clock. Ship those, they aren't action. This is just kind of complete and utter turbo mode. There's not really anything besides don't die. Use the ring because the clock is 2 turns versus 4 turns. If I don't kill that, yeah, I'm going to lose Academy runes, whatever. There aren't actually artifacts in my graveyard. This is one of those things where you're just like, please Elspeth show up, which, isn't terrible. Sadly, can't EE away a Shambling Vent. It's not Oblivion Stone. Same deal as before. Have to fire that, otherwise I'm dead on board. And so Foundry, after popping EE on Flare, I now have exactly enough to go to 2 life after chumping the Shambling Vent. My opponent doesn't have the kill spell, so I survive it too. But they have another vent. But I have an Elspeth, so nice top deck. And I think this is the point where I realize if I had an unlimited clock, I would have won this game. But as is, doesn't turn out great. My opponent's Painful Truths draws a bunch of nothing and passes. I start ticking up and cast Thopter Foundry to make another dork. My goal here is to block these off on combat if my opponent attacks. Crack Relic immediately to maybe draw something relevant. My opponent wants to force me to lose some amount of Elspeth stuff. I make excessive blocks to play around removal. And now Lingering Souls means that this Elspeth is not going to be able to protectedly... Let me think about this. Actually, yeah, I think if I had infinite time, I would have been okay. I would have gifts for Thopter. I guess I boarded out of Thopter, so that changes the equation. Yeah, so I would have gifts for Sword, Talisman, Path, extra card. I can guarantee not take these hits. I can plus Elspeth. Elspeth then ultimates and stays alive, and then my opponent dies, but did not see that due to 35 seconds on clock. I make the turbo mode play of ult Elspeth. Pretty low on life, but I get to make a Thopter token here. Opponent flashes back Souls after creeping corrosioning away the 1 Thopter. I think I also should have just recurred the Thopter to make another flyer. I guess all my creatures are flying now, so it's all the same. And here I just enter the hope my opponent can't kill me because I sure can't kill them in time. I think given infinite time, I win this game, but as is, I lose the clock. Spent a little too much time game 1 just thinking through stuff, a little too much time setting things up in the background. Could have won, didn't. Unfortunate outcome. But it looked pretty close every single game, which is a really good sign because I think traditionally these blue-white decks have had issues with Abzan or like Jund in various ways. And the card advantage power of Thirst and Gifts really showed how good it is. As well as the combo felt pretty good at pressuring Liliana. Having a couple outs to Liliana was nice. It certainly could be better, but I'll take it for what it is at basically a push.